Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the learning curve effect. It's this hidden but totally predictable force that pretty much explains how we get better at almost anything we do over and over again. So let's just kick things off with a simple question that really gets to the heart of this whole thing, something I'm sure we've all felt. I mean, think about it. Remember the first time you tried a complicated new recipe? You were probably double-checking every step, measuring everything super carefully. Now, fast forward to the 10th time you made that same dish. You're just flying through it, right? That improvement, it's not just a feeling, it's a real, measurable thing. Now, you might be thinking, oh, sure, things get cheaper or faster because of economies of scale, buying stuff in bulk. But the learning effect is something else entirely. It's not about logistics or materials. It's a purely human thing. It's about people just getting smarter and quicker at a task simply because they've done it before. And get this wasn't just some vague idea someone dreamed up in a business school. It was actually first observed and measured in a super high-stakes industry where, believe me, every single hour of work mattered. Okay, let's walk through this timeline. It all started way back in 1925. Guys building airplanes noticed something fascinating. The more planes they built, the less time it took to assemble each one. Then in the 30s, a researcher named T.P. Wright came along and turned that observation into a mathematical formula. This was a huge deal. It was so reliable that during World War II, the government used it to predict how quickly they could build ships and planes. And after the war, well, it became a go-to tool for all sorts of companies. So what's the big deal if you ignore this? What happens when a business just forgets that people get better with practice? Well, the results can be pretty catastrophic, especially when you get to one of the most critical decisions you can make: how to price your product. So picture this. A company is about to launch a fantastic new product. They do all their homework, they calculate their costs, and they figure out a price based on what it costs to make the very first one. After they add up all the time and materials for that first, slow, kind of clunky unit, they land on a price: $63. On paper, it makes perfect sense. But here's the fatal flaw in their math. They completely forgot about the learning effect. They didn't account for the simple, predictable fact that their team would get way faster and way more efficient with every single unit they made. And the fallout from that one oversight? It's brutal. The product hits the shelves way too expensive. Nobody buys it. The whole launch is a disaster. And what could have been an amazing product gets scrapped. All because they failed to plan for human improvement. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this works, because the rate of improvement isn't just a guess. It actually follows a surprisingly predictable pattern. This right here is the golden rule that T.P. Wright figured out. Your average time per unit doesn't just drop randomly. Nope, it goes down by a consistent fixed percentage every single time your total production doubles. So the pattern reveals itself through doubling. You make 1 unit, that's your starting point. Then you measure the average time again after you've made 2 total, then again at 4 units, then at 8, and so on. And at each of those doubling milestones, bam, you see that predictable drop. Let's look at a classic example here, an 80% learning curve, which is pretty common in aerospace. If that first unit takes 100 hours, by the time you've made 2 of them, the average time per unit drops to 80 hours. Double it again to 4 units, and the average drops again to 64 hours. It's like clockwork. A perfect mathematical march towards efficiency. But of course, this can't go on forever. You can't just keep getting faster until you're making something in 0 seconds, right? The source material is really clear on this. The big gains happen early. As you produce more and more, the improvements get smaller. The curve flattens out, and you eventually hit a plateau of peak efficiency. Now, if you're thinking, okay, cool for building airplanes, but what's this got to do with me? Well, think again. The places where this applies are way broader than you might imagine. The learning effect really kicks into high gear whenever you have these 3 things. 1, the task has to be repetitive. 2, you need to have the same people doing it so they can actually build that expertise. And 3, they've got to do it consistently, without huge breaks where they might get rusty and forget things. And this is what's really wild to me. Look at where this is being used today. Yeah, it started in manufacturing, and that's still a big piece of the pie. But check it out. Research shows that almost half of its use is now in the service sector. We're talking finance, law, publishing, any professional job with repetitive tasks. So at the end of the day, the learning curve is so much more than some dusty old manufacturing formula.
It's a fundamental principle of how we as humans get good at things. And if you understand it, you have this incredibly powerful tool to predict and plan for getting better at just about anything.
And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. If the path to mastering something is this clear, this predictable, it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? What's the next skill you're planning to put on your own learning curve?